we've done a non-Zoom. What's that? Oh, John Gray. That's right. Yeah. I want to say this is a really exciting time for our organization as we have a great opportunity to infuse new talent into what we consider to be a very strong player development system. As we've previously said, that strong player development system and a pipeline of talent to the Major League club is an important aspect of not only building a successful Major League team, but also sustaining that success. I want to commend all of our amateur scouts who spent the last several years scouting this draft class and preparing for this week. Likewise, I want to recognize Kip for the work he's done. Adam Lukowitz, our Director of Amateur Scouting Operations, and Josh Boyd, our VP and AGM of Pro, Amateur, and Pac Rim Scouting. They've done a tremendous job of preparing for this year, setting up a system and process which has been really, really good in the draft room. And overall, I feel really, really confident in the level of work and the process, the preparation that we put into this year's draft. And I think most importantly, I'm excited for our fans to follow a new class of talent through our system. With that, we're happy to answer any questions. We can't get into specifics about players, obviously sensitive in terms of where we draft, but nonetheless, happy to answer anything you guys have.
Going for the microphone, Evan. Go ahead.
So when you're evaluating players and you're looking at the needs of the big league club, that there's obviously a time gap in there from the draft process to when those players reach. How do those thought processes unfold in trying to kind of, I guess, time things out the right way based on need and kind of forecasting out into the future?
Well, Emily, from my perspective, I think the most important thing is just getting high-end talent into our system, and that's what our focus has been, independent of position. And certainly we recognize the needs at the big league level. There are a lot of ways to fill those needs, some internally through our player development system at the upper levels, and some externally. And so I think in regards to this class and knowing the timeline that it will take for some of these players to reach the major leagues, I don't think the specific needs of our team right now impact what we are planning to do in the draft. Those needs may change in 2 years when these players are big league ready.
Chris, and Durton, for you as well, you guys have a top 10 minor league system now, according to Fangraphs. You have promoted some guys to the big league level. First of all, how does that make you any more less risk averse? Are you more willing to take risks in the first round this year, maybe because of the state of the minor league system?
I think more than anything, from my perspective, one, I don't get caught up in rankings. I think we have a very strong minor league system. I don't know, time will tell how it stacks up to other systems. I do think we have a very high floor in terms of the depth of our system and the talent that we have. That said, we're trying to add as much talent as possible for the reasons I laid out at the beginning, which is to sustain success as this franchise, and part of our vision is to have a very strong pipeline of talent that's continuously replenished, no matter where we draft. I think this year drafting at the top allows us the opportunity to infuse, potentially one of the top 3 players in the draft into the system. And in terms of the external rankings and publications, that'll obviously help. But more importantly, I think as we evaluate our system, we're very, very comfortable with where we are and excited to add to it.
Kip, you want to add anything to that?
No, I agree with Chris. It's like doing this as long as I have. I mean, the rankings are rankings, and I don't really get too caught up into that and try not to look at them too much. But, it's an opportunity, when you get to pick this high, obviously you get access to players you probably have in the past, and we've been 2 years in a row now, and so we feel like we did that last year with Jack, and, we're going to get another player this year to add to that. And as far as like the risk adverse, no. I think our process is our process, and we're going to go through it. And we're the guy that checks the most boxes that we see is the guy we're going to take. So, yeah, hope that answers your question, Kevin.
Yes. The other part of that question would be on your board this year. Again, the other thing that you might not buy a lot into is the experts. I know you don't buy into rankings or experts, but a lot of people indicate that there's either 2 or 3 players and then a fairly significant separation. Do you feel like there is a clear number 3 on your board, or is there not much separation between 3 and 10, 3 and 8.
I mean, in my opinion, I think up in our room, there's some separation, but not a ton. We're talking about a few guys here, and I don't want to get into the specific number of players we're talking about. Well, we are still. We don't feel like we still don't know what's happening ahead of us, so we got to go through all those scenarios and make sure we're prepared, and we're going to be prepared. So I would say it's probably a smaller group, yes.
Kennedy?
Does not having those second and third round picks from the signings of Corey and Marcus affect, maybe not the first round, but what you guys do on day 2 and day 3?
I think just big picture wise, Kennedy, I think, in the way we've gone about it this year, our scouting department has done a tremendous job of really focusing on the 4th round and later. There are a lot of tweeners that we are pretty confident won't get to us. While we're prepared for those players, our group has done a tremendous job. A lot of the conversation in the draft room has been about the 4th and beyond. I think it's an area of strength for our organization. I think Kip and his team have done a tremendous job of adding talent in those rounds, and so I'm excited to see who's available and what we can access when we get there. That said, that was a decision we made in free agency last year, that we knew the price we were giving up to sign these players, but we felt like they were the right players for where we are, where we're going, and the talent we have coming, and the flexibility we have to add externally as well through free agency.
And with our scout focus, in our process too, we went at it. I told our guys we're going to scout like we normally do. Just because we thought some of these guys were going to be tweeners and some of them are, we still scouted them. We still did our work. We probably maybe spent a little less time on some of these guys towards the back end, until we got here to the draft. But, there's not a guy up there that's going to go in the first day, so to speak, that we haven't seen, don't know, haven't done the work on. So we're prepared for anything, and that was my message to our scouts too. Hey, don't be surprised. That was my fear personally. Like, you would eliminate some guys, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, a guy falls in the draft, and you aren't prepared. We're going to be prepared if that happens.
Question for either one of you guys. With all the ways that exist now to evaluate a player, to all these quantifiable measurables, is the batting average on nailing a draft pick, so to speak, is it any better today than it necessarily was, say, in 95 or 2000 before all this stuff existed?
Interesting question. I would say probably from an amateur side of it, like the high school guys probably haven't changed. Maybe some of the colleges are a little lower probably than they have in the past, but I haven't really put much thought into it as like historically how it's been. But I can say probably from the high school end, it's probably similar. Maybe the college a little lower. I think we're seeing some of that, that's happening, kind of the big leagues as far as the advent of the more of the power kind of player and less average kind of player. So yeah, I could see that probably in the college end.
So, Max, it's a great question. I don't know the true answer. I mean, I guess in general, I would say there are only so many big league jobs, and there are only so many players that are going to access those jobs. So I think statistically the numbers are probably around the same as they've ever been. But in terms of the way we, the way you evaluate a successful draft, I think there's more information than ever. It's how you process and use that information and what matters specific to your organization. And there's a lot of teams that do it in different ways. And but I don't know exactly how you define what success is as it relates to 30 years ago with this.
So with that in mind, I think it always still comes down to this discussion, right? Predictability versus projection. And I'm curious if you can characterize in general, that conversation would seem to be even more significant this year with a number of high school guys at the top of the draft. How did that play out in the room?
You want to start?
Yeah, I just think it's our process we go through, and there's a lot of high school guys up there we're considering. Obviously, you look at it, but that being said, I mean we dig deep into these kids, and I feel like nowadays a lot more. And to Mac's point, there's so much more information out there, and with all the tools and resources we have with our, there's been a big collaboration between departments with not just the amateurs. It's not us just sitting up there, writing reports like it used to be. And so you have data, you have our strength and conditioning, you have our player development. I'm probably missing somebody, but it's a total organizational thing, and so effort, so to speak. And so as far as projecting versus I don't know. It's like we know so much more now, Evan. So I don't think you project as much anymore.
Evan, I think that to some degree it's understanding the certainties of the player, the uncertainties of a player, and assessing how much of those certainties outweigh the uncertainties and which of those uncertainties you feel confident in your organization's ability to improve over time. And some are improvable and some are not. And so it's assessing that and then assigning a risk level to that and a confidence level in your ability to improve those things.
So at your pick, the slot's like 7-5 or 7-7, and you have 9-5 total. Do you feel like you will have enough money after signing the big honcho to get all your other guys signed up, or do you feel like you need some more flexibility?
No, obviously, Jeff, that plays into some of the draft day strategy, depending on who's available. But certainly, we're comfortable with the pool that we have and confident that we'll fill out 20 rounds or 18 picks, I guess, without the 2 that we are missing this year, and get a very solid draft class.
Mac,
I know you don't want to be picking third, but having been here now for a second consecutive year where you get a high pick, is it harder to pick a high pick? Or, like I said, you're picking a third as opposed to 23rd. Is one any more difficult than the other?
This is my second year of picking this high, and hopefully it's the last year picking this high. I will tell you this, just in terms of my experience, it's even just going from second to third and not knowing what's going to happen in front of you. It's certainly, there's a lot more thoughts that go through my head and a lot more uncertainty. And you know, I can't speak to picking later in the draft. I hope that we're picking 30th for a long time. When we get there, I'll tell you the true answer and from my experience. But right now, it's not an easy decision, and there's a lot that goes into it. You know, I think when you get down to a lower level, there's probably more uncertainty in terms of the players who are going to be available, but also more certainty in terms of the time you spend at the top of the draft on certain players as well, or don't spend at the top of the draft. So, you know, for example, if we call the Los Angeles Dodgers right now, they probably wouldn't be prepared as well on the players we're discussing. So it's, you know, I think it's all sort of bucketed based on where you're picking, and I don't know if any one particular year is easier than another. Kip can answer that.
I don't know if I can, but been all over the board through my years here, and I don't know if you get access to better players when you're up top. That's for one, and different drafts have different players. I think this year's pretty strong up top, so as opposed to some other years we've been up there. But I don't know. It's like only two players can go ahead of us, so the options are, you know, we've got a lot more options than if you were picking 30, right? So, you know, I think that's probably easier that way, but it's still, you know, a little more pressure to make sure. I mean, there's always pressure in it, but it's like, yeah, it's up there, and, you know, you hope this guy's the impact player, and he's going to be. We know we're going to pick that guy, so we're excited about being able to be up there and have access to those kind of players that are going to impact your organization.
Chris, you mentioned the risk element, and there's one particular stat that I think it may have been Kip that's mentioned it, but the possibility that, like, swing and miss translates from high school into pro ball. That is that a significant red flag for you guys, or is that outweighed by raw tools?
So, Evan, I'm not going to speak to specific characteristics. I think that in general, you take all the characteristics and you assess. You may have one characteristic that is, you know, to some degree a deficiency, but how much better are you at these other characteristics, and how much does that outweigh? And that's not only true of the amateur players, that's true of our players at the big league level as well. And it's part of a modern day evaluation process, and where you're really just trying to see how much one outweighs the other, and if you can tolerate some mix of the combo, whatever that combination is. So specific to swing and miss, I'm not going to get into it, but I think just in general, understanding the player's strengths, what their weaknesses or deficiencies may be, and then assessing, you know, how much some of those strengths outweigh, and are those deficiencies fatal flaws.
So I know you just said you're not going to discuss specific, and I've been waiting 5 minutes to ask a question about specifics, so here we go. I heard you say earlier that you want to take the player that checks the most boxes.
Yeah.
Right. So some of those boxes are easy. You know, this guy hits the ball 500 feet. This guy throws the ball 100 miles an hour. But you hear scouts talk about makeup all the time, and I'm curious if you could give me some examples of some of those boxes that fit sort of under that makeup umbrella. What do you guys look for as far as the person goes?
Well, I think we forced our guys, like, what guys eat, breathe, and sleep the game. You know, they drive to be good. Some of those traits, and we look for that in the big league guys. And we felt like we had two of those last year with Corey and oh, geez, I'm drawing a blank. Marcus. Excuse me. Sorry about that. But you know, I think that's the big part of it. Like, you know, because baseball's a hard game. And especially you're talking like high school kids that are, you know, sometimes away from home, from their parents for the first time for extended time. And if they don't really love the game, in my experience, it's going to be hard. So, I mean, that's a big part of it. Just, you know, and getting to know them and, you know, the dynamics of their families and what kind of people they are, I think answers a lot of those questions. But, I mean, I think it comes down to, like, how much drive they have and how much they love to play the game of baseball. I think, and that's kind of the separator for me on the makeup.
Levi, just to elaborate on that, this has been one that's been a real sticking point for me. I think it's a true characteristic of a Texas Ranger player. Are they a winning player? Do they make the players around them better? Do they do everything they possibly can on a daily basis to maximize their potential and help their team win? There's so much that goes into that, right? But in the end, that's kind of the makeup breakdown for me. And, you know, as we speak to our young players, as we speak to amateur players, we challenge them with that. Do you understand what it takes to be a major league player? Are you willing to meet us halfway in terms of utilizing every resource we give you to maximize your potential? And it's you know, I'm not going to say it's pretty close to a non-negotiable for me. If you don't check those boxes, you're likely not going to be a Texas Ranger. You're not going to be a Texas Ranger for long. It's a very, very important thing for me.
Okay, so follow up on that then, because that seems like any idiot at 18 years old would be like, yeah, obviously, willing to do that for sure. How do you see through the yes and know which yes is actually a yes?
I can probably. To me, we've had extensive history with all these guys. Their actions show you, right? It's not just like him coming up and telling me that. You know, our scouts would not believe the time and effort they put into finding some of this out and to basically answering that question. So it's not just him, you know, saying, "Oh yeah," because we've all heard that. A guy can tell you, you know, I eat, breathe, and sleep it, and I want to be a winning player. But does his action show you that? You know, and that's what we challenge our guys on, and we answer that question basically. All of us do. So yeah, to answer that, it's not just somebody saying it to you. He's got to show it in his actions also.
And just to elaborate a little more, it's the work our scouts do, not only with the player, but with their families, with their coaches, their peers, understanding where they come from and who they associate with, and you know, how they were raised. There's so much that goes into it. It's the true value of our scouting department are these relationships, these deep relationships that they've formed, and I have great appreciation for the work that our scouts have done in terms of understanding this class of draft picks, and I feel like we know them pretty well.
You guys, I know every draft's got its own personality, but picking in the top 3 last year, again this year, any takeaways, anything that maybe influenced your process this year, having a high pick based on your experiences last year?
I think we kind of going through the same process we went through last year. I mean, obviously different players, you know, different pool of players. So I think the process we go through to get to the final decision is kind of the same. I don't know if it changed from picking 2 to 3. I mean, obviously there's different players to compare and contrast, that kind of thing. But I think we're still going through the same process. We want to come out the end with kind of the things CY said about, like, is he a winning player? You know, does he eat, breathe, and sleep it, right? And is he talented? You know, he's a good baseball player. So, and especially like a position play, like both sides of the ball is huge to us also. So, but I can't speak like it's similar, Jared. I don't know if we've done anything different because we picked Ty last year either. I don't know, maybe you.
No, Jared, I would say, you know, from first year to second year for me being in the draft room and understanding the process, I think that, one, it continues to evolve. I think that some of that is just the incorporation of a lot of different tools. You know, there's a number of areas that Kip mentioned, from R&D to performance to mental skills to the medical side to even just third-party consultants that weigh in on these things, and we incorporate all of those into our process. We'll never have one standard process that we follow. If we're not evolving, we're not getting better. And so it has evolved from last year. I wouldn't say it's specific to picking high in the draft. I think it's just a goal of ours to always continue to look for ways to improve. And again, I think that Kip, Josh Boyd, who has worked with Kip, and Adam have done a tremendous job of really streamlining this process and taking all this information, helping us synthesize it in a way that makes it applicable to the things that matter most to our selection process.
And then I know you guys mentioned this is a multi-year process. What is this week about? What are the things that you guys are trying to accomplish here in the final days?
I don't know, we've talked about these players extensively, or even coming up. We had our area, this is the first year we've had all our area scouts come in since pre-pandemic. So actually that was a good treat for everybody to get in the same room, the camaraderie, and talk about these players. But I think it's just a fine tuning of it all, like, just getting down to the brass tacks of everything, so to speak, and making our. I know you go up in that room with some of these guys, there's difference of opinion, and so just weeding through all that and trying to come out on the other end with the best decision we can for the Texas Rangers. And so we're going to do that here in, I guess, Sunday, right? So we're going to be ready. But, I mean, I don't know if there's anything specific we do. It's just fine-tuning it and get down, and like I said, there's a lot of different opinions, and we got to, just hear it all and see where we end up at the end.
One or two more.
Yeah. I think we all assume you guys are taking a position player. Are there any pitchers? I mean, there's no like Jack Leiter, it seems like, that's standing out there. Are you guys considering a pitcher at number 3?
This is a specific we don't want to get into. Just it's the pitching talent in the draft is solid. The position player talent is really solid, and we'll evaluate what our options are as we get into Sunday.
So are there college and prep players you're still sorting through?
Yeah, I'd say we've narrowed it down to small bucket of players that we know are going to be available, and going through a number of different strategies depending on who's on the board at the time at which we pick, both college and prep.
Last one.
Just the last thing. You talked about the makeup thing over and over and how big it is to you. But again, it seems like the one thing that's impossible to determine is the makeup of an 18-year-old coming out of high school versus a 21 or 22-year-old coming out of college, and how that will change between 18 and 22. How much of a problem does that present for you in making a final decision here?
It doesn't. I trust our ability to evaluate that and understand who people are and what motivates them, what makes them tick. They'll experience different levels of adversity, which will impact or have an influence on who they become, but, pretty confident in our ability to evaluate the makeup side.
Dave.
So obviously, for those of us who have never been in that room, it's a fascination, right? There's so much stuff that you guys have to consider and parse. But I'm curious, why now you've been in there 2 years. If any of it is surprising, shocking, different to you, like, could you have imagined the types of things that are considered in that room when you were on the other side of this?
Yeah, Dave, in some ways, nothing surprises me because our group wouldn't be doing their job if they didn't turn over every stone looking for information to help us decide who a player is and what a player may become. That said, I think probably the biggest thing I didn't have an appreciation for as a player was just the level of work that the scouts pour into this. And to see our group and how well they know the players and how much time, energy, and the emotional attachment that many of them have to their specific players and their regions, it's impressive. And that's happening in 30 organizations across the country throughout Major League Baseball, and it really gives me great respect for the job, the efforts that go into that, and it shows me how much it all contributes to a winning franchise. And I'm very confident in the work Kip has done and his group in putting us in the best possible position to infuse high level of talent into our system. As I said earlier, I never want to be picking this high again. It's been hard. There's a lot of pain that we've all gone through to get to this spot. And the goal is that it's only up from here. And so I think this is a fun year that we're picking this high. But I don't think any of us are satisfied picking this high. We're hopeful that this is the last time and we're moving on to better things.
Okay, thank you.